Thanks for all coming out. Just bear with me. I'm not too nervous, but I've definitely been an emotional weekend, so we'll kick on with it. Bobby, what are you doing, darling? I wish I had her. Let's grab her. Come here. Come on, here you go, sit to me. Party's on. Good catch. Good morning, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Zeph, and today I have the privilege of standing here sharing my testimony and graduating from Victory House. To stand here today sober, healthy, clear-minded, and hopeful is something I never genuinely thought I would experience. There was a long period of my life where I was convinced I would either die from addiction, spend the rest of my life in prison, or completely destroy every relationship around me before I ever got a chance to change. Ooh. But today isn't just about addiction or recovery, it's about transformation. It's about how God can take someone completely broken, lost, angry, selfish, and hopeless, and slowly rebuild them piece by piece into something new. I was born on the 4th of October, 1997, this makes me 28, nearly 29, in Liverpool, Sydney. I grew up with three sisters, Bethany, who is 2 years older than me, Lelia, who was 10 months younger than me, mum and dad got busy, and Ellie, the youngest of the family, who was 7 years my younger. Being the only boy in the family, apart from dad, definitely shaped me in a lot of ways. My sisters were naturally close with each other, and I often felt like I had to figure things out on my own. Bethany was always the responsible one, keeping us accountable, while Lelia was often in her own world. When I was still young, my family moved to Queensland because Dad was pursuing better employment opportunities. I was raised in a Pentecostal Christian home with strong Christian values. Church, faith, and family were a major part of our lives growing up. My mum was a stay-at-home mum for as long as I can remember, and although I didn't understand it properly as a child, she battled severe mental health issues throughout much of my upbringing. Looking back as an adult now, and especially as a parent myself, I honestly don't know how she managed to do it. She raised 4 children while fighting battles in her own mind every day. Dad worked relentlessly. He often worked multiple jobs while always being heavily involved in the church and the community. Him not always being around was never because he didn't care. It was because he was either working to provide or serving others. I don't remember a lot of my younger years, but I always remember gravitating towards people. Even from a young age, I craved connection, acceptance, and validation from social groups. Whether it was school friends or kids from the nearby streets, I constantly wanted to fit in somewhere. At school, I had potential. I was intelligent enough to do well, but I never had the discipline or ability to apply myself properly. Even as a kid, I was more invested in social status and being accepted by my peers than building a future for myself. I realise now this was one of the biggest issues that followed me throughout my entire life. I didn't know who I was, so I became someone I thought people wanted me to be. I wasn't the easiest son for my parents. I wouldn't say I was severely rebellious at a young age, but I definitely didn't make life easy for mum, especially considering everything she was carrying mentally and emotionally. Looking back now, with more of an understanding perspective, I honestly admire both my parents deeply for somehow keeping our family together through it all. When I started high school at North Lakes in grade 8, my ability to adapt to any social circle was in full swing. I became like a chameleon. Socially, I fit in everywhere. I could walk into almost any group and become whoever I needed to be in order to feel accepted. The problem was, most of the time, I wasn't actually being myself. I was a version of myself created for other people. That need for validation and acceptance slowly began shaping my behaviour more and more. I started distancing myself from family and friends, people who genuinely cared about me, instead became obsessed with meaningless approval from peers. At the age of 13, I started drinking heavily, not experimenting occasionally, heavily. I would drink until blacked out, often on school nights. Around the same time, I started smoking weed regularly and became addicted to nicotine as well. In my friendship groups, this behaviour wasn't seen as dangerous. It was normal. Getting drunk, getting high, fighting, sneaking around, that became our culture. and eventually it became my mindset too. This was also when I started having run-ins with the police. I was never formally charged at that age, but it was not uncommon for the local cop to drag me back to my parents' front door after finding me passed out at a park or involved in a fight somewhere. At the time, I thought I was just being a reckless teenager. Looking back now, those were early warning signs of a much deeper issue. At the start of grade 10, I moved to St. Columban's College. In many ways, it was a fresh start. Different people, different environment, different influences. Things calmed down for a little while. I was playing footy, scraping through school, then started casual work. Life seemed relatively normal. Then in 2013, at just 15 years old, I found out the girl I was seeing was pregnant. At that age, you think you understand responsibility, but the reality is I had no idea what I was becoming a father truly meant. On the 2nd of May 2014, my son Spencer was born. I had already dropped out of my final year of grade 12 and honestly had no clue what I was doing. I was still a child, trying to raise a child myself. On the 3rd of September 2014, one day before turning 4 months old, Spencer was found unresponsive in his sleep. That moment shattered me completely. Losing a child changes you in ways words can't properly explain. It left me confused, angry, empty, and completely lost. I remember constantly asking myself how something so horrible could happen and what possible purpose there could be behind it. Growing up in a Christian home, I always heard phrases like God's plan, everything happens for a reason, but after Spencer died, I couldn't comprehend any of it. Instead of drawing closer to God, I became full of resentment and hatred towards anything religious. I convinced myself faith was just a coping mechanism people used because they couldn't handle the harsh reality of life and death. I buried my grief instead of processing it. Addiction became the thing I used to bury it with. Over the next few years, I spent most of my life simply treading water. I had no real direction or purpose. I bounced between casual jobs. In the meantime, welcomed my daughter Indy into the world and moved into a place with a partner at the time. I eventually landed my first real job, working for a restaurant point of sale company in operations and support. I worked in Brisbane while the company was based in Melbourne, which means I travelled frequently for work. From the outside, things looked positive. I had work, money, relationships, responsibility. But internally, my drinking and drug use began escalating rapidly. Weekend drinking turned into binge drinking. I was introduced to MDMA whilst partying, and my weed became so regular that I found myself smoking myself to sleep every night. Once again, I gravitated towards friendship groups that reflected the lifestyle that I wanted to live. Slowly, home life started falling apart. Instead of stepping up as a partner and father, I convinced myself it would simply be easy to leave. So that's exactly what I did. Indy was a year old, and not long after I left that relationship, I found out that my ex-partner was pregnant with my second daughter, Iva. I buried myself in work, partying, drugs, and distractions because staying busy stopped me from having to face myself emotionally. During this period, I met Doss, Jaden. I had no idea how significant she would become in my life. We had actually known each other over the years through mutual friends and from working together at my first ever job at Red Rooster. We bumped into each other again on a night out at the Normanby, and within a few months we were dating. At the time, I was still heavily invested in partying and social life. About a year later, our eldest son, Leighton, was born. One of the memories that still haunts me today is barely making it to his birth after being out partying all night, still heavily under the influence and honestly in a worse condition than Doss, who was in labour. That's how consumed by addiction and selfishness I'd become. Over the following months, I lost my job, I quit, moved back into my parents' house with Doss, and later welcomed our second son, Archer, into the world. I eventually found work in an insurance company, and we moved back into our own place, but the same patterns followed me everywhere I went. I was constantly out with work colleagues, using recreational drugs daily, and eventually was introduced to cocaine. Then COVID hit. Working from home slowly became working from a mate's house while drinking every day and using cocaine during the weekends as well as weekdays. My entire life revolved around substances, socialising, and avoiding any kind of responsibility. I was neglecting my family emotionally, mentally, financially, and spiritually. Eventually, I convinced myself the best thing for me was to move out with a friend because things at home weren't working. But the truth was, as like before, the instability in our home was created by me. My priorities were completely self-centered. After leaving insurance, I started working in concreting. That's when my addiction, if not before, completely spiraled out of control. Drug use on construction sites was heavily normalised. Stimulants before work, during work, and after work became a daily part of my life. What started as recreational cocaine became everyday dependence. Then I started selling drugs. At the time, it made perfect sense in my head. Free drugs, easy money, and most importantly, validation. People needed me. People wanted me around. And because I'd spent my entire life craving approval, that false sense of importance became addiction in itself. Eventually, I was introduced to methamphetamine. Meth completely changed the trajectory of my life. At first, it made me feel unstoppable, productive, confident, energetic, and social. But eventually, it destroyed my ability to function normally altogether. To balance out the stimulants, I used pharmaceuticals and weed to either come down or sleep. My life became one constant cycle of uppers and downers. I convinced myself I needed drugs to work, socialise, cope, and survive. But addiction eventually strips away everything good in your life. I became unreliable. I burnt bridges with employers. I constantly lied. I manipulated everybody. I became emotionally unavailable and toxic in any relationship I'd created. The people who loved me the most were the ones suffering the most because of my choices. Eventually, my partner at the time left due to the person that I'd become. And honestly, I don't blame her. My own actions I ended up with led me to nothing and nowhere to go. Over the last couple of years, despite everything, Dos remained supportive in helping me see the boys, even though we had gone our separate ways. Slowly, we started spending more and more time together and eventually rekindled our relationship. Not long after, our daughter Harper was born, as you all met before. Some of the most precious memories from that period are spending days with Harper, watching her learn to walk, talk, being present for the moments that I had missed in my kids earlier before. Internally, my demons were getting louder. No matter how many substances I used through this time, I couldn't escape myself anymore. Eventually, addiction and desperation pulled me back into crime. Money, ego, survival, and the pressure of providing all became excuses I used to justify my behaviour. As I became more involved in selling drugs and criminal activity, I once again grew distant from my family. The very people I told myself I was doing it for were simply slipping further away because of my actions. Over a year, the charges began piling up. My addiction expanded further into pharmaceuticals, benzos, opiates, Lyrica, meth, weed, GHB, and everything else I was using. I overdosed more than 10 times through this period. Every overdose pushed the limits further. Every time I survived, I somehow convinced myself I could continue. It was August 2024. I was found unresponsive outside a unit complex in Eagleby. I spent nearly a week in a coma and another week in the ICU. The people around me who loved me did everything they could to help me stabilise and get clean, but the truth is, I wasn't interested. Addiction had me completely trapped in denial. Even after surviving a coma, I manipulated medical help simply to gain legal access to the substances I wanted. The following 6 months became even darker. More overdoses, more crime, more dangerous situations, and more destruction. Eventually, I ended up in jail, facing serious charges, including arson, drug trafficking, and home invasion. Before my arrest, I disappeared from home for weeks without contact. I still remember making my first jail call from the watch house, and Dad and Dos were there. They were devastated, but lucky that I was alive. Thankful I was alive. I'll never forget what Dos said to me that day. It will be okay. We'll get through this. I love you. I didn't deserve her support. I didn't deserve her loyalty. But hearing those words reminded me that getting better wasn't just about me anymore. It was about everyone who still loved me despite everything I had done. Detoxing in jail was brutal. Due to my dependence on multiple substances, withdrawals caused seizures, and I had to be heavily medicated just to stabilise. Over time, I slowly came off everything completely. And for the first time in years, I was left alone with my thoughts. That silence forced me to reflect That silence forced me to reflect honestly on my entire life. I spent months speaking to Doss and the kids daily, writing letters, reflecting, and trying to figure out whether there was still any hope left for my future. Cheryl, my mother-in-law, often wrote to me, and those letters gave me strength during some very dark days. Then I heard about Victory House from someone in my unit. Something inside me ignited. Deep down, I knew that if I was released, I couldn't go back to the same life. I needed structure, accountability, and direction. Doss actually believed in Victory House before I fully did. She organised my admission process with Luke while I was still inside, and by the grace of God, I was accepted into the program. The following 6 weeks waiting for bail was some of the longest weeks of my life. But on the 15th of May, I was granted bail and headed out to the farm at Mundoolan after stopping briefly to see my children. Even arriving at Victory House, I still wasn't fully surrendered. I wanted change, but I wasn't convinced that it was the answer. For my first 4 weeks, I did bare minimum. Bare what I needed to not get exited, essentially. Then one Friday, purely out of emotion and impulse, I convinced myself that I needed to go home to my family. I manipulated my way to getting picked up and ended up breaching my bail. That night, sitting at home, immediately how bad I had messed up. For the next 3 days, I was overwhelmed by guilt, shame, anxiety, and regret. I had once acted on pure emotion without thinking about consequences. Monday morning rolled around and Cheryl called. Honestly, I didn't want to answer because I knew she was going to tell me exactly what I needed to hear, and she didn't disappoint. Without enabling me or excusing my behaviour, Cheryl once again sacrificed her own time and energy to help organise another opportunity with Luke. If I was willing to humble myself and ask for another chance. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what I thought was right had constantly left me toward destruction, so I surrendered. Life at Victory House wasn't easy. I missed my family deeply. I struggled with pride. I struggled with thinking I was better than others because of my upbringing and thought I was somehow different. Most of all, I struggled with my emotions and constant habit of acting out of them impulsively. One of the biggest turning points in my recovery came through Cheryl and Luke helping me connect with my psychologist, Dr. Bronwyn Watson. Bronwyn completely changed the way I viewed emotions, thoughts, discipline, and behaviour. She taught me how to unhook from my thoughts and stop allowing emotions to dictate every decision I made. For most of my life, if I felt uncomfortable, I escaped. If I felt stressed, I used. If I felt unhappy, I ran. She taught me that emotions are real, but they do not always deserve control over your actions. She taught me something so simple yet so life-changing, that I could still do things even when I didn't feel like doing them. For years, I relied on motivation, stimulation, or substances just to function. Bronwyn taught me the value of discipline and delayed gratification. She taught me that growth often comes through constantly doing difficult things. One thing she said will stay with me forever. Everyone is jealous of the trophy, but no one is jealous on how it's achieved. That changed the way I viewed recovery, discipline, suffering, and growth completely. Sadly, Bronwyn is no longer with us today, and I'll never get the opportunity to fully thank her for the role she played in my recovery and the way she helped strengthen my character. But her impact on my life will stay with me forever. I'll go off script a little bit here. My journey through Victory House wasn't always what you see today, obviously. I still remember 2 days, or 2 times in particular, where Luke had to drag me into the office. And I won't tell you what I did, but essentially what are you doing? Do you want to round with the turkeys, or do you want to fly with the eagles? And I know that's a Dave saying, but honestly, and it's a me saying now to the boys, those dictations through that changed my perspective on, where I wanted to be is not what I was doing isn't a reflection of where I wanted to be. Victory House has changed me in ways I never thought possible. When I first came into the program, I was broken, lost, and facing the consequences of my choices. I came from jail into rehabilitation, carrying addiction, pride, anger, and unhealthy patterns that had damaged not only my life, but the people around me. At the beginning, I thought I just needed to get clean. But throughout these 12 months, I realized I needed complete transformation from the inside out. Victory House taught me discipline, accountability, structure, honesty, and responsibility. More importantly, it taught me how to slow down and take ownership of my life instead of blaming others or running from those problems. Throughout the program, routines, groups, and my relationship with God, I began learning how to live with purpose instead of survival mode. Each stage of Victory House completely changed me differently, challenged me differently. In the early stages, I had to break old habits, humble myself, and learn obedience to structure. That was difficult because I was used to doing things on my own. As I progressed, I started developing consistency, emotional control, and healthier ways of thinking. I learned how to respond instead of react, how to accept correction, and how to support others around me instead of only focusing on myself. By the later stages, I found myself stepping into leadership, encouraging others, and realizing how much growth had taken place in my character. The biggest change in me has been my values and mindset. Before Victory House, I lived impulsively and only thought short term. Now I value integrity, consistency, family, faith, and peace. I've learned that being a man is not about pride or control, but about responsibility, humility, and the choices you make daily. I've become more patient, more emotionally aware, and more committed to living honestly. One of the greatest motivations through this journey has been my family. My partner standing by me and my children looking up to me gave me a reason to fight for change even on the hardest days. I want to be a present father, a trustworthy partner, and someone my family can rely on. Most importantly, Victory House helped strengthen my relationship with God. My faith became real during this journey, and I learnt how to rely on Him daily instead of relying on myself or substances. I now understand that recovery is just not about being sober, but about being the person God created me to be. Graduating this program is something that I am proud of, but I know this is only the beginning. I finished my program with tools, values, discipline, and faith that I plan to carry into every area of my life. I'm grateful for every lesson, every challenge, and every person who invested in me during this journey. My story is proof that change is possible when you surrender, stay committed, and most importantly, trust the process. To Dave and Louise, thank you for everything you do behind the scenes to keep Victory House running and the continued service you do for this community. Programs like this don't exist without people willing to sacrifice their time, energy, and lives for others. I genuinely would not be standing here today without the opportunity you created through this program. Thank you for believing in restoration and giving people like me a chance to rebuild our lives. I hope one day I can give back even a small piece of what has been given to me by helping change the lives of others the way that you have. Luke, thank you for being more than just a leader in this program. You have become a role model for me and someone I genuinely look up to as a brother. You showed me what it actually means to put words into action and live life with integrity. You taught me accountability, but importantly, you held me accountable even when it was uncomfortable. There were times you believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and times you challenged me because you could see the man I was capable of becoming beneath all the addiction, pride, and excuses. Through your leadership, consistency, honesty, and faith in me, you've helped shape my character and played a massive role in weaving me into the man I am today. I'll carry those lessons with me for the rest of my life. Cheryl, I don't know where I would be without you. From the days after my ICU stay, when you were trying to help me get clean, to supporting me through jail and helping me get into Victory House. You never gave up on me, even when I had completely given up on myself. Your wisdom, honesty, and ability to speak truth into my life got me through some of the hardest days I've ever faced. You saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself and continue to remind me of it when I felt broken beyond repair. Thank you for every phone call, every hard conversation, every prayer, and every moment you invested into my recovery and my future. Dos. You have been my rock through every storm I created. You held our family together during seasons where I completely fell apart. You supported me through those years of chaos, addiction, selfishness, and pain when I gave you every reason to walk away. There were so many moments where I didn't deserve your loyalty, your patience, or love, yet you stood beside me and believed there was something better for my life. I will never truly be able to repay you for everything you've carried for me and our family, but I promise with the help of God, I will spend the rest of my life trying to become the man you deserve, the father our children deserve, and the leader our family deserves. To Mum, Dad, and Ellie, thank you for never closing the door on me, no matter how many times I let you down. Thanks for stepping in and supporting my family when I was incapable of doing it myself. You gave up your home, your time, your peace, your energy, and your resources to help carry the weight of my mistakes and give me the opportunity to better myself. Looking back now, I can see how much you both sacrificed for me over the years, even when it hurt. I know there were times I caused you disappointment, stress, and heartbreak, but your love and support never stopped. Thank you for continuing to pray for me, believe for me, and stand by me until I finally found my way back home. To Damo and Liam. Where's Liam? Thank you, brothers, for standing beside me throughout this entire journey. Thank you for every pep talk, every hard conversation, every word of encouragement, and even the moments where the truth was harsh, but exactly what I needed to hear. There were days where I needed accountability more than comfort, and you both were willing to give me that because you genuinely cared about the man I was becoming. Thank you for being an ear when I needed someone, for pushing me when I wanted to give up, and for most of all, being true friends through the hardest and most transformative times of my life. I'll always appreciate the role you both played in helping me get where I am today. And finally, to my brothers and sisters in Victory House. This program is not easy, but the challenge is necessary. The hard days, the pressure, the correction, the moments where you want to quit, those are the moments that build your character and prepare you for the life outside these walls. Use this time to strengthen your relationship with God, to discover who you really are, and to find purpose beyond addiction. Embrace the difficult moments because they are what will give you the strength to live a life free from drugs and destructive patterns. Recovery is not just about staying sober, it's about becoming the person God created you to be. Keep going, because the life waiting for you on the other side is a life worth fighting for. All right, to finish off. As I look towards my future, for the first time in my life, I genuinely feel I'm walking towards purpose instead of running from pain. I want to continue staying on the path God has ordained for my life and keep building my life around the values I've learnt throughout this journey. More than anything, I want to be a present father, raise my children with character, discipline, integrity, and faith they will need to succeed in becoming good, God-hungry people. I want my life to mean something beyond money, status, or temporary pleasure. I want to live a life with an eternal mindset, serving people and helping others. Towards the end of this journey, one verse has spoken to me and continues to stay on my heart. It's Isaiah 6:8. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here I am, send me." I truly believe God has pulled me out of addiction, destruction, and darkness for a reason bigger than myself. Helping others through Victory House and walking alongside people who were where I once was is something strongly placed for my heart and for the next season of my life. Thank you.